Today, we're going to look at my rear end.
Welcome to Robert's British Cars. This is part 5 of the restoration of the 1964 MGB. Today we're going to drop the rear suspension along with the rear axle. Not a real difficult thing. The difficult thing is going to be those nuts and bolts have been resting in place for about 60 years. Once we get those parts on the bench, we'll figure out how to proceed with their reconditioning.
Let's start by getting these spider webs and cobwebs out of here. Ew.
Okay, I've got the jack stands under there. I'm going to lower the differential onto the jack stands, and guess what? The car is not heavy enough to take the weight off the straps. So, yeah.
We're going to go after this nut on the shock absorber first. It's an 11/16. Clean these up a little bit. Original color. I've got a 5/8 holding the head, and I'm going to put my antique impact driver on here and watch the wrench fall off. Yeah, I guess I was. Well, here's an interesting predicament. So I've got the nuts off the shock. So the shock is loose. This won't separate. So I have to get this out. And I think that whole thing is going to spin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the shackle bolts and remove this plate with the shock, throw it on the bench, and worry about it later. So I have 3 of the 4 nuts off the shackle, and you can see there's a space in there. You can also see that there's a lot of slack in the support strap. So if I take this off, the weight of the car is going to drop like a stone because, as you can see, it's not on the dolly. So I'm going to have to come up with a plan, and I think that plan is going to be, I'm going to jack up the differential again, I'm going to remove the jack stands, and I'm going to let the weight of the differential lay on the leaf springs. I took the nut off, and the axle is hanging on the strap now, but the spring popped down. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. As you can see, I've got both shock absorbers off now. Let's take a look and see if there's anything interesting here. And oh my, yes, there is. The little bracket here that sits on top of the rear axle. This one has a plate for the rubber stop. This one is missing. Let's start by taking off the front shackle. That looks like a 5/8 bolt and an 11/16 nut. I'm surprised how easily these are coming off. Let's disconnect the strap. If I put the wrench on here and try to turn it, guess what? The whole differential is moving. So what I'm going to do is try to get the top one. Well, as you can see, I got the strap off, whoosh, and I've got the spring off. So we'll go do the other side now. This is the part where we just pull the rear end out from under the car, but I thought I'd try something a little different. We have the rear axle on the table. We also have another table full of stuff. This is my plan. Shock absorbers I'm going to rebuild. This right here I'm going to replace. I'm going to buy new stuff. This over here, I'm going to recondition the metal brackets. I'm going to reuse the shackles, but I'm going to get new polyurethane bushings. Rear it's in there. It's pressed in. This one, not so much, but I'm going to replace these with polyurethane. I'm going to take the springs apart by, here's one I took off, by undoing the clamps that are around the leaf springs, separate the leaves, replace the rubber in between them, and replace the padding here. I'll recondition this and recondition the leaves and reuse them. That being said, I'm going to get started on reconditioning these parts. As far as the rear axle goes, we're going to examine this after we get done with the parts. I use this socket to push out the bushing. When the bushing popped out, the spring compressed around the socket, and now the socket is stuck. This is the story of my existence. In case you're wondering how to get these springs apart, it goes something like this. This is the clamp, and as you can see, the clamp has little bunny ears on it, and there's one here on the other side. And we bend these ears up and take the clamp off. It goes something like this. Put that screwdriver there, and then bend the clip down. And one's going to be straight this way, and then the other one is straight up. Then we'll pry it up, maybe, like this. Okay. And there you go. There's the rubber that goes around it. And now you can see how these kind of fit. One goes in here, and then the other one goes there. And then I guess you just clamp them down when we put the spring back together. The next thing we're going to do here is remove the pin bolt. The pin bolt, well, it's called a pin bolt. It's got a pin, and that pin centers the leaf spring in the differential. Now I've got this leaf spring clamped in the vise, because when I take this nut off, operative word here is spring, I want these to be held together. I don't want them to pop out as I loosen that bolt. So we'll take the bolt out, then disassemble the springs. There's our nut. There's our bolt. I will loosen the vise. If I was in Miami, this would be a Miami vise. Oh yeah, God, that cracked me up. Another interesting point in between the leaf springs, there's a pad that's rusted to the metal. Be careful taking these out if you ever do this, because these pads are also not available online. So now we're gonna clean these leaves up and treat them. I'm gonna take some 80 grit sandpaper to these leaves. We'll see how they turn out. Well, I just got done painting all the components to reassemble the springs. I spent 2 days grinding the rust off of these parts, and I also took the rust off the nuts and bolts and painted them as well. I found that if I take the rust off the nuts and bolts and don't paint them, they rust. So they're painted. Now I'm going to stand here and watch paint dry, then turn all these parts over and do the other side. Here are the components for the leaf springs and rear suspension. Now, before I get started, I want to point out two things. One is these holes in the middle of the spring that the pin bolt goes through, they're not in the center of the spring. There's more spring in the back than in the front. So if you ever do this, just make sure you put them in the right orientation. For example, if I took this one and turn it around, it won't assemble that way because when the center hole lines up, there's a lot of room back here and not much back here. So when I turn it back like that, the hole lines up and they're pretty even. The other thing I wanted to point out is this. This is the nylon pad, vinyl. I think it's vinyl. Anyway, it's the pad that goes in between the leaves. As you can see, it's pretty perished, deteriorated on the ends. So I don't want to use this. You can't order them. These are not available to replace. So what I did, as I reach over here, I made a new one out of vinyl. Where'd you get the vinyl? Okay, this vinyl is the same vinyl. Well, this used to be vinyl edging that goes around your garden. And it's just the same thickness and about the same weight as the original. So I'm going to put it together with these and we'll see what happens. Now, before I start assembling these springs, I'm going to get out my grease and grease them up a little bit, kind of like this. Okay, I have all the leaves greased up, and not only is that grease good for making the springs work smoothly, but it really leaves my hands soft and supple. So the first thing I'm going to do is get these two little pieces of wood, put them here, take our first spring and put it there with our pin bolt going through it. Then we'll put on spring number 2, spring number 3, and now we have to put a pad on. Okay, spring number 4. And a pad. I don't know if that's right. Say if you do it wrong, you'll know. Yeah, that was close enough. Okay. Spring number 5. Goes right like that. The last pad. And then the last spring. Okay. Where's my spacer? No. Yeah. Spacer. And the nut, hopefully. Alrighty. I'm holding the head of the pin bolt with my channel lock pliers, and I'm just going to snug this nut and bolt up a little bit. I don't want to make it tight because I have to be able to move the springs to get the clamps on. And maybe a little bit more. Okay, now we'll put the clamps on. As I mentioned, the clamps that go around the leaves are short, medium, and long. And that's because they go around 2 leaves, 3 leaves, and 4 leaves. And according to my picture, the little rubber part goes on the top of the spring. So I'm going to put the little piece of rubber on here. And this is going to go through there like that. Like that. Come around here. And then this has to push through the slot. Maybe. Like that. Okay? So I got my clamp on. I'm going to put it right there. That looks like a good place for it to be. Now we just have to bend the little ears over. Easy for me to say. So before I try to bend that over, I'm going to get my C-clamp here and clamp this. There we go. Clamp it down tightly.
and then bend this over. So here's the other side. I've got the clamp on it. I'll get my channel locks out here. See about starting the bend. And since this feels pretty solid, we'll try the hammer on this side. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah. You can't have the camera on the table that you're hitting on. Okay, I moved my production. There. Let's do an inspection. And here we go. We have the first clamp on 2 leaves. Now, we just have to do this 5 more times, and this leaf will be clamped. As I'm putting the clamps on, one other thing to note. This little button right there on the bottom of the spring goes through the hole in the clamp. Okay? So that's where you know where to put the clamps. The leaf spring is finally assembled. There she is. Now we're going to look at the components that attach to the leaf spring. This is the plate that goes on the bottom of the leaf spring. The shock absorber attaches right there. These are the 2 plates that sandwich the leaf spring and their pads. This is the front bushing. It's a brand new polyurethane. And back here, we have the rear shackle with polyurethane bushings. The first thing I'm going to do is put these bushings in the front of the leaf spring. These may have to be pressed in, but this goes in pretty easily. There's the bush that goes in the middle. Put the bolt in the back as I drop the leaf spring on the floor here. And the nut, and the washer and the nut. There you go. There's the nice polyurethane bushing in the back of the leaf spring. I have the front shackle here. I lubricated them up with some grease. I'll slide that on there and put that in there. Take another one. Ta-da! Little washer and a nut. Oh, we don't put that on yet. Bad me. We'll do this side like this. Then we'll put the thing on there. Then the washers. And then the nuts. Maybe. There we go. And there's the back shackle. Here's the plate. And here's the pad. That goes like that. And that is pressed in the little hole. Make sure it's in there tight. There, it clicked in. So let's put the plates on the center of the spring here. One goes on what is the top of the spring. The spring is upside down right now. And this one will go here. And then they're held on with the U-bolts. Okay? This is the plate where the shock absorber goes. I'm not sure if it's orientation right now because I won't know that till I put it on the car, which one is left and which one is right. But this is where the shock is attached. I'm going to take these zip ties and go through here just like that and zip tie these together and then put them in storage. We are finally finished with these leaf springs. They are reconditioned, they are wrapped up, and they are ready to go into storage. Unfortunately, I'm not quite exactly sure where storage is yet, but they're ready to go there. So far, we have spent $2,643.74 before the leaf springs. What did we spend reconditioning these? Let me put on my spectacles and get my notes here. We spent $6 on the sandpaper. These shackles were $12.76 for a set of 4, and I tipped them with stainless steel lock nuts. That was a cost of $11.92. The bushings in the front of the leaf springs cost $21.96, which brings our total so far to $2,696.38. Now, in episode 6, or part 6, we are going to look at the shock absorbers and the rear axle, conditioning what we need to condition, getting the rust off, painting them up, and getting them ready to put back on the car if we ever get to that point. So that's it for this episode of Robert's British Cars. Please, if you enjoy this and you want to follow along with the restoration project of our 1964 MGB, please subscribe. Until then, keep the wrenches turning, and we'll see you next time.